Hello everybody, John here from Gaming in the Wild, and I've got a brand new video for you today. It's the first video of 2025, and it's a look ahead at all of the great things we have to look forward to in video games this year. There are a huge amount of games coming out this year. Some of them have firm release dates, some of them have release windows or quarters or that kind of thing, and some of them we really only know the name or have seen a single trailer. And I sifted through hundreds of games and condensed it to a list of games that I'm very excited about this year and that I think you should be too. And if you like this video, likes are appreciated. You can subscribe to the channel for more like this. I will flash up my Games of the Year 2024 video on the screen now, and I will tell you about the channel's Patreon at the end. So let's get into it. Here are my top 30 indie games that I'm looking forward to in 2025. I want to start out with some games that have a firm release date, games that have put a stake in the ground and said they are coming out on this date. The first interesting game of the year is Hyper Light Breaker, and while it's not a full release, it is entering early access on January 14th. This is of course the multiplayer third-person roguelike that is a prequel to the stone-cold classic pixel art game Hyper Light Drifter. The player controls a breaker instead of a drifter in this game, and we venture into a randomly generated area called the Overgrowth to defeat a series of regional bosses and ultimately the Abyss King. What's interesting about this game is the complexity of the world that is being procedurally generated, as it apparently has biomes and bosses and enemies that will reshuffle every time. And as well as that, between runs we can wander a hub city and presumably tweak our skills, our class, our melee and ranged weapons, and presumably group with friends or other players to go on another run. This game has been through a bit of development hell from what I hear, but I was a huge fan of Hyper Light Drifter, I was a big fan of Solar Ash, and I'm a big fan of the studio generally, so I'm very curious to see what they've pulled off here, and I'm really hoping for the best when Hyper Light Breaker hits early access on January 14th. On January the 21st, we get Eternal Strands by Yellow Brick Games. This is a cool Colossus-adjacent fantasy action game where you're exploring a crumbling old city and fighting gargantuan bosses. Much like in Shadow of the Colossus, you can grab onto them, you can climb up them, you can employ different kinds of melee and ranged attacks and use elementals, which seem to be a big focus of the game. I think this game has a really nice look to it. It's pretty, it's intriguing, and it's one of the few games on this list that's coming to Game Pass, so Xbox fans have something to cheer about. That's January 21st for Eternal Strands. On January 22nd, we get a long-awaited, gothic, rock-hard Metroidvania. And no, I don't mean Hollow Knight Silksong, but if you're waiting for that game, then maybe this one is for you. Ender Magnolia: A Bloom in the Mist is a sequel to the gothic 2D combat-focused Metroidvania Ender Lilies, which I really enjoyed actually. I played quite a bit of it. It's a Hollow Knight-like with a focus on unforgiving combat and fierce boss fights. It has a really beautiful, entrancing art style, and I did find that the bosses, while rock-hard, were actually beatable. I just really had to focus in, learn their patterns. They were the kind of bosses that go from feeling like you will never defeat them in a million years to you just learning the patterns, getting into the zone, and then taking them out without barely getting hit. It's coming to all of the consoles, including Nintendo Switch. I think it might be a really good handheld game actually. I might grab it for my ally. That's Ender Magnolia on January 22nd. On January 28th, we get The Stone of Madness from the game Kitchen, published by Tripwire. If you recognise that studio name, it might be because they were the makers of Blasphemous 1 and 2, but this is a bit of a departure from that style. It's an isometric medieval stealth tactics RPG set in a monastery, so you'll be creeping around, trying not to get spotted, breaking into different studies, throttling guards, and generally just trying to escape. After a couple of rough stealth game experiences in 2024, I'll be very curious to see how they implement the AI and the enemy awareness, because I think that those things are quite hard to perfect and they are make or break for the genre. I'll be very curious to see what happens with The Stone of Madness when it comes out on January the 28th. And then on January the 31st, we get Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector by Jump Over the Age and published by Fellow Traveller. I mean, Citizen Sleeper was a stone-cold classic. It was a wonderfully realised tabletop RPG turned into a fascinating, addictive, story-forward video game. If you haven't played it, then please treat yourself. You play as a robot refugee who arrives on a sprawling space station. You get to roll a set of dice to try and complete time-sensitive tasks, like finding droid insulin before your robot body breaks down or hacking into systems before they collapse. It makes for some really tight, tense gameplay, and it's all set off by Amos Roddy's soundtrack, which communicates the loneliness of this space life. And Gareth Damian Martin's writing is humane and intelligent throughout. The sequel sees the player heading out into space, flying between stations and situations, and it builds on the original with new gameplay wrinkles, like disasters that will unfold as you are exploring space wrecks and things like that. The demo for this one was astoundingly good. I'm really excited for it. I took to it like a duck to water, and I can't wait to play more. Of Citizen Dungeon Sleeper 2 Starward Vector when it drops on January 31st. Moving into February, we get Lost Records Bloom and Rage by Don't Nod on February the 18th. Don't Nod have been on a really hot streak the last couple of years, and this game is by the original designer of Life is Strange, and it's adjacent to those games in vibe. It's set in 1995, and it sees 4 high school friends reuniting to try and untangle a mystery from their past. I've played quite a few Don't Nod games in recent years, and the games tackle branching path gameplay with varying degrees of complexity and success, but Lost Records seems to be ambitious in terms of the variable outcomes that you'll be able to engage with, so let's see how much our choices matter when it drops on February the 18th. That's Lost Records, Bloom and Rage. On March the 6th, we get Grimoire Groves by Stardust and published by Wings. That's a publisher that specialises in female-led game production. Just a quick mention for this one, it's a colourful top-down action crafting game that I tried out at Next Fest last year. I loved the eye-popping visuals, and the gameplay was simple and engaging. You'll be farming, you'll be crafting, you'll be adventuring, you'll be carrying out side quests. And it has a decent story too. I like a low-stakes comfort game to play alongside other things, and I'm hoping that Grimoire Groves will fit the bill for that. Love the look of this one. If you have a Steam Deck or a PC handheld, I think this game will be the perfect fit. That's Grimoire Groves out on March 6th. And this is the last one that we have an actual release date for. This game is Wanderstop. This is a game I'm really looking forward to. It's coming out on March the 11th. It is by Ivy Road, and it is published by Annapurna. It's the third game from the Stanley Parable and Beginner's Guide developer Davey Redden, or Redden, I'm not sure how we're saying that. He has developed a reputation for weird, sharp, wry, third wall breaking games. And he's been talking to the media saying that Wanderstop is a straight up farming game made as a response to his real life burnout. But I for one find that a little bit hard to believe, because the first trailer saw the protagonist wrestling with the bland pleasantness of her cozy farming life. So I'm expecting the coziness to be couched in a story about trauma and anxiety and maybe more. I'm really hoping that Davey's narrative is a smokescreen and this game goes off the rails to somewhere weird. We'll find out either way when Wanderstop drops on March the 11th. And that brings us to the end of the list of games that have firm release dates, but there are 7 games that I want to shout out that have a release window, whether it happens to be a quarter, whether it happens to be a month, whether it happens to be a season. All of these games are subject to delay and postponement and things like that, but let's hope that they hit the windows that they're aiming for, because these games are all really exciting. First up, penciled up for quarter 1, is The Alters by 11-Bit Studios. I played the demo of this one last year and I'm really excited about it. It got pushed back into 2025 last year and I was slightly bummed at the time, but honestly we have to support developers when they do that, because the game obviously needs a little more work, a little more love, a little more polish, and let's hope that that's what The Alters is getting now. It's like a video game reimagining of the sci-fi cult classic movie Moon. Our protagonist is the last surviving member of a space exploration crew who crash land on a hostile planet. Using bits of salvage tech and racing against time, you're trying to stay alive before a cosmic event wipes the planet out entirely. This includes some third person running around on a very spooky, cool planet. You have to find resources and bank them, and you come back to your base and you build new modules to go out and get even more resources to build more modules and so forth. It's a really good gameplay loop, but it is complicated by the addition of clones. You realise how much work there is and you start making clones of yourself which you can set to work to do jobs for you. So we have third person exploration, base building, resource management, and a mind-bending sci-fi story all folded into one. The demo was so good that I actually stopped myself from playing it so as not to spoil myself on the full game. Definitely one to watch. I can't wait to dive into The Alters when it drops early this year, hopefully in quarter 1. Also in quarter 1 we have a very different game. This is a 3D platform romp called Ruffy and the Riverside, made by Socrates Labs. This is a really fun looking 3D platformer game with colourful Paper Mario style graphics, and I'm a sucker for anything that feels like it's continuing that trajectory of the collectathon platformers I grew up with, like Spyro and so forth. And the trailer for this one really hit the spot for me. It really gave me that nostalgia and it really made me want to dive into this really cool little world, so I've got a very firm eye on this one. That's Ruffy and the Riverside, penciled in for quarter 1 of this year. Next up we have Morsels, a very intriguing looking game by Furcula and published by Annapurna, a publisher that went through a bit of drama last year when their entire staff quit. Morsels is described as a fast-paced creature collecting roguelike with a rotating roster of characters to switch between at will, so perhaps imagine a cross between Nobody Saves the World with all of its different classes and the compulsive action gameplay of Enter the Gungeon, then put them both through an animal well-like CRT filter for that retro look. The art style is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. It looks very stylish and action-packed packed, and I am curious to see how it manages the make or break roguelike factors of rewarding progression and finding a way to short-circuit the repetition of the genre. Games like Rogue Legacy 2 and Hades have done it in the past, so let's hope that Morsels do it in 2025. Fingers crossed. That's Morsels, coming out in February of this year. Penciled in for spring of this year is an interesting looking game called The Midnight Walk, made by Moonhood and published by Fast Travel. Moonhood is a new name for the studio Zoink that produced Faya and Lost in Random before being embraced and then unembraced, and I'm glad that they're still kicking because they make good games, so it's good to see the Lost in Random team back at it with another Tim Burton adjacent gothic adventure game. The look of this one is big news. They say every asset in the game was first sculpted in clay before being 3D scanned into the game and animated in a stop motion style, and that gives this one a really exciting look. I enjoyed Lost in Random. It had a great look too, and it had a real-time card game combat thing going on. Even if it was a little bit unpolished and lumpy, it was very, very good, so I'm very curious to see the gameplay here and see if they have any twists in store for us with The Midnight Walk. It's penciled in for spring of 2025. This one's just early 2025, which could mean anything. This is Wheel World. It's published by Annapurna. It is the game formerly known as Ghost Bike. Now it's called Wheel World. I think Ghost Bike is a better name actually, so Wheel World doesn't feel like an upgrade. Maybe they had some copyright issues or something like that. Nevertheless, it's a really interesting looking game. The story here is that you're a young cyclist who is trying to save the world from some kind of big bad, and this apparently entails racing, roaming, tricking, and upgrading your bike, all from the comfort of your saddle. I'm super curious to see what this one turns out to be. I do love an open world game. I love a game with smooth traversal. I was a big fan of Season, A Letter to the Future, another bike-based exploration game. So I'll be hoping for some fun exploration gameplay when Wheel World lands in early 2025. That takes us to a couple of big hitters, and the first one is Hades 2 by Supergiant. This one is of course in early access right now and apparently is quite close to complete, but it has a Q2 to Q4 release windows, so that's the entire back half of the year basically. I'm not a big roguelike guy, but Hades was one of the ones that really stuck with me, and what I liked about it was how it handled progression. You got new story bits and you got new powers and new currencies to spend after every single run, and it had lots of carryover. It made it feel like no run was wasted, and it had ample motivation to keep completing runs once you'd cracked the formula. What I didn't like about it was that there were only 4 levels and they came in the same order with the same bosses time and time again, so I'm really hoping to see some Dead Cells influence pumped into this one, maybe with varying paths through the game, having the level sequence change up, having remixed bosses and so forth. I've managed to hold off on playing this so far in early access because it is a Supergiant game. I would really enjoy the full polished experience on my first playthrough, so I'm really looking forward to Hades 2 hitting its full release between quarters 2 and 4. Also in early access now, with a Q4 release in mind, is the creature-collecting Poke Zelda sports game Beastieball. It's by Greg Lobanov, the creator of the colourful sing-em-up platformer Wandersong and the excellent top-down paint-em-up Chicory. I guess that makes this one a ball-em-up. It's a weird little odd volleyball game where you meet animals out in the wild, you play them in turn-based tactical bouts of Beastieball, which is a volleyball-like sport, and then you add them to your sports team if you win. There's an RPG element to it, so you'll be playing people all around this kingdom, and you'll be, trying to get to the top of the tree and become the king of the sport of Beastieball. I played the demo of this one and I absolutely loved it. It was cozy, it was engaging, it has really nice style to it, it has a Lena Raine soundtrack, and much like Hades 2, I swerved the early access. I just enjoyed and finished the demo, but apparently it is in a shape where you can play it beginning to end and they're just polishing and adding more creatures and so forth. So if you're curious, you can play it now. For me, it's one to watch. Place your bets on whether Beastieball will see a full release, as it is penciled for Q4 of 2025. And that brings us to the long list of games that don't have release windows, but they are penciled to come out this year. I'm going to start off with Cairn. This is by The Game Bakers. It's coming to Steam only for now. It's the makers of Fury and Haven coming back with a tight, technical, Jusant-like climbing game. They describe it as a survival climber, where you have to plan your route up the rock face and employ strategy and tools and know-how to make it up the sheer cliff. I like traversal forward games. When I was playing Death Stranding, I kind of wished there was just a hiking mode where you could just carry stuff around without all of the combat and, Kojima stuff. And so I'm really happy to see climbing games becoming a thing in the traversal genre. There's a demo of this one for you to try right now if you would like to. See if you can summit that one before the game comes out sometime in 2025. That's Ken. Another big one is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This caught a lot of people's attention with a really good first trailer. It is a fantasy tactics RPG that is heavy on the fantasy. It is the debut game from Sandfall, another studio founded by ex-Ubisoft developers. And I know that Ubisoft is a big publisher, but we seem to get several new studios from former Ubisoft devs every year. Some were never heard from again, but some go on to make really big games like Stray. I think Clair Obscur is going to fall into that camp. It looks high budget, it looks slick, it looks stylish. I'm really quite interested in this one. It's being published by Kepler as well, and they had a stellar 2024, so keep an eye out for that one. That is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Next up is one that's close to the top of my list. It is Mixtape, the next game from Beethoven and Dinosaur, published again by Annapurna. These developers made The Artful Escape, which was a brilliant, propulsive, spacefaring rock opera. It had simple gameplay, but it was so high on style that it really didn't matter. That game was a wild time. Check out The Artful Escape if you haven't already. Now they're back with another 80s-inspired nostalgic adventure. That is Mixtape. This time they are taking on the sci-fi teen movie genre. It has eye-catching, stop-motion adjacent visuals. That seems to be a bit of a trend this year with South of Midnight and Midnight Walk, but this one also has a soundtrack full of pop classics and buckets of style, so fingers crossed it comes out this year. I can't wait to see what this turns out to be. I've got a lot of faith in Beethoven and Dinosaur. That is Mixtape. We've also been promised a release for Nivalis by Ion Lands and published by 505. This is an open world game from the developers of Cloudpunk, the detective game where you go around in a flying car through a dark, rainy, neon Blade Runner style city. They did an awful lot with lighting, considering that it's a game with voxel graphics, and their second game opens things out into the city of Nivalis. It switches up the gameplay from detective stuff to being a bit more of a life sim, so you can, run businesses, have jobs, presumably romance people and stuff like that. There is also a bit of a suspenseful plot buried in here as well. It's another game that I'll be very curious to see how it turns out, because I love the central promise of letting us see how it feels to live in a cyberpunk city rather than being shepherded along by a story and that kind of thing. That is Nivalis coming out this year. And it seems that Heart Machine games are like London buses, because we might also get Possessors this year. This is the Devolver published action platformer that took a lot of people by surprise, considering that they are neck deep in the development of Hyper Light Breaker. But Heart Machine have grown a lot since the small team pixel art classic Hyper Light Drifter. It's a full-on studio now, as we saw in the NoClip documentary about them, so apparently they have capacity now to work on 2 games at once. This one does look really stylish. It has that signature Heart Machine style with the dark, gothic, cyber vibes, and their signature move of putting blood and hemoglobin in everything. I will play anything that Heart Machine puts out, so I will have my eyes peeled for news on Possessors. Another grimy cyberpunk game that's coming out this year is Replaced. That's 3 in a row. This one is by Sad Cat. It's being published by Coatsink and Thunderful. It's a long-awaited cyberpunk action platformer game with an excellent crunchy pixel art style set in an alternate 1980s US. We've seen a lot of trailers for this one, but the Steam page promises free-flowing action combat and a deep dystopian story. You play as Reach, an artificial intelligence trapped inside a human body against its own will. It's striving to adjust to human life in and around Phoenix City. I'm definitely interested in this one. It's just my kind of thing. I love a speculative sci-fi setting. This one is also hitting Game Pass, so keep an eye out for Replaced this year if you're still hanging on to that particular subscription. 2025 will also be the year of Slay the Spire 2, if we're lucky that is. Slay the Spire is the roguelike deck builder that needs no introduction. It absolutely blew up the genre and became a forever game for a lot of people who just can't get enough of it even now. Games like Balatro owe a lot to Slay the Spire, so it really has been a formative game. I played 100 hours of it before I felt like I had hit the ceiling of what I could do, and the sequel promises new characters, new modifiers, new encounters, new bosses, so RIP to another 100 hours I guess. That's Slay the Spire 2, penciled in for 2025 release. I have a couple of more obscure ones to round out this list of 2025 games. First up is Starbirds by Tucana, published by Annapurna yet again. This is going to be a big year for Annapurna Interactive. This is an interesting one from the makers of the cult hit village builder Dorfromantik, this time through the filter of kind of Mario Galaxy. Instead of rural villages on a flat plain, you're building space colonies wrapped around the surfaces of 3D asteroids. So there's a new dimension to contend with in your procedural colony building. It's intriguing for sure. I hope they find a control scheme for rotating these asteroids that feels natural on a controller. Dorfromantik was a really nice handheld game, and I really hope that Starbirds becomes one as well. And the final game that I have down here with a 2025 release window is Usual June, made by Finji. They're a very reliable indie publisher, and this one is a 3D adventure game that is set in the town of Fen Harbor. June, the titular character, takes a normal summer job but ends up befriending ghosts and fighting supernatural foes. There is a demo of this game, and I tried it out in Next Fest. It felt a bit lumpy and like it wasn't quite cooked yet. The controls were a little bit soft and unresponsive. I wanted it to be a little more snappy, but Finji usually release great games, and it was a very early demo, so let's hope that they've polished it up, sanded off those edges, made it feel good to play when it comes out sometime this year. That's Usual June. And just to round out the video, I want to rattle through a few games that have no release window at all, but they have been announced. We know they are out there, we know they are coming, but they aren't guaranteed for this year. But who knows, we might see them. I've got a feeling we will see a few of these games by the end of the year. First up is Big Walk by House and published by Panic. This is a mellow co-op game where you wander around with your friends. It's from the makers of the Untitled Goose Game, so I think we can expect a bit of mischief thrown in there. It's certainly got a nice art style and it looks like a chill time. That is Big Walk. A game published by Raw Fury is also coming this year. It is Blueprints, made by Dogubomb. It's coming to Steam. It's a mysterious mansion exploring game with a Mobius influenced art style. I think this might be one for all you Golden Idol people out there who like to crack a case. That is the Blueprints. We also have Extremely OK Games follow-up to Celeste. This is fairly long awaited at this point. It is Earthblade. It is the Celeste team's next game. Not a lot has been revealed so far. I think we've just had one trailer, at least as far as I have noticed, but it looks like it's less of a straight platformer with a bit of exploration going on. That's Earthblade. I've also been very attracted to Phonopolis by Amanita Design. This is an adventure puzzle game with papercraft visuals from the developers of Machinarium. It seems to have influences from avant-garde art movements of the past like Futurism and Constructivism. It looks like a moving Kandinsky painting. It's a very distinctive look. I'm very curious to see more about this one. That is Phonopolis. I'm going to wildly guess that this next one comes out around Halloween time. It is Post Trauma by Red Soul Games, another one published by Raw Fury. They seem to be a publisher that is holding out on prematurely announcing release dates this year. Post Trauma is a horror game where you play as a postal worker who is lost in a Japanese subway. It's super dark and nasty. It looks like it has some body horror and some David Lynch psychological aspects to it. That's Post Trauma. And the last two are two games that I'm very excited about. The first one is Soulitaire by Beardshaker Games. This one is a story-led card game, a bit like Signs of the Sojourner, the very underrated card game for me, where you open a little back alley tarot cafe. Customers come in, you play cards to try and uncover their future. Depending on how well you do in this solitaire style game, your advice will be more or less accurate, and you are advising people about big life events, so it has some story consequences to how well you do. I thought the demo of this game was genuinely perfect, and I'm really excited for it. There is a demo on Steam if you'd like to try it yourself. That is Soulitaire, to be announced when that one will be coming out. We also have no information on Sword of the Sea. This is the next game by Giant Squid. I really like Giant Squid games. I liked Abzu. I really like The Pathless, and this one seems to continue that trajectory. It's a sand surfing game that looks like a spiritual successor to Journey via The Pathless, and you know, Giant Squid is an offshoot of that game company, and the people at Giant Squid were involved in the making of Journey. So I think this game is playing to this studio's considerable strengths. Very excited for more news on this one. I think we're going to hear something about this game this year. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw a full release for Sword of the Sea. There are, of course, two games that I had on last year's Indie Look Ahead video. These are the White Whales, and I think I called them that last year as well. I've been reading all of these games out from a spreadsheet that I made to try and document and track everything, and in the release date category I just wrote LOL. The first one is, of course, Hollow Knight Silksong, the follow-up to Hollow Knight, of course. This game was originally announced on the 14th of February 2019, so it's going to be the 6th anniversary of its announcement. Do you think that February 14th will be a release for Hollow Knight Silksong to mark that occasion? Let me know in the comments if you do. And finally, we have Mina the Hollower from Yacht Club. This is, of course, the Game Boy style pixel game that the world has been waiting for so long. A lot of people have been speculating about this one. Last time we heard from the devs, it didn't sound like it was close to completion, so who knows, maybe we will, maybe we won't. That is Silksong and Mina the Hollower, the eternal two white whales of the indie game scene. So just to round this out, I'm going to give you my top 5 most wanted games for 2025. At number 5, it is Soulitaire, the game that I just mentioned. It's a humble conversational card game that I just can't get enough of. I love that demo. I've played it twice. I don't think that it is on the mainstream radar, but I'm very excited about this one. That's Soulitaire. Number 4, Wanderstop, the Davey Reedon joint. Let's see if he's being straight up or not. I want to know the secrets of this game. At least I know that one's dropping in March. At number 3 is The Alters. The demo was absolutely fantastic, and after 1000 Resist was my game of the year last year, it's fun to see a different kind of clone-based sci-fi in our immediate future. Number 2 is Sword of the Sea, which I just talked about. I liked Abzu, I loved the Paskless, and I hope that the studio keeps going from strength to strength. And my number 1 most anticipated game of 2025 is coming out really soon. I'm very excited, guys. It is Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. This one is all but guaranteed to be excellent at this point. The demo was just perfect. I played it, I didn't want it to stop, basically. And that one is coming out later this month. So that is this year's 2025 look ahead video. I hope you enjoyed it. These are always really fun to make. They are very work intensive. I have a spreadsheet here that is covering 33 different games. All of them have developers, publishers, notes, links, whether they're coming to Game Pass. And you know, I'm just one person, so I do miss it sometimes when a game gets moved or delayed or moved forward or a release date drops. So please forgive me if any of it is out of date. I've tried to keep it as up to date as I can. And this was just 30 odd games of hundreds that are coming out this year. So if you feel like I have missed any games that you're excited about that you would like to put on my radar for this year, then please do drop them in the comments. I do check out every comment that I get, and I do look at the links or the games that people recommend. And just before we wrap up, let me say a big thank you to the channel's newest patrons, Chris Marie, Joel Yupp, Harry Pidd, Michael Matula, and Glenn Jome. Thank you very much to all of you for jumping onto the Patreon. It really helps me out. You know, the origin story of this channel is that I was a games industry layoff, one of the many that we heard about last year, and that's why I'm putting more time into my channel now. So if you would like to support me and support this channel and the podcast that I make, you can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. You can join for $1 a month. You will get 15 bonus podcasts. You will get a playlist of 7 guest appearances that I have made. You will get a patron-only Discord invite, which is just a lovely little community that has blossomed around this channel, and it's the aspect of it that I'm probably the most proud of. And finally, you will get behind-the-scenes notes on making these videos, on growing the channel, and the whole YouTube journey thing. Patreon.com/gaminginthewild for that. But until the next video, take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.